Let's see if we're live. Should be. I'm going to check the stream as you've joined in. Say hello in the chat. Oops, did I go live on the wrong one? It's very possible. Oh, no, I am in the right one. Let's pull up the wrong link for something else. Hopefully I shared the right link in Meetup. I'm probably going to check on that. If anyone's already here in the chat, say hello. I should be live in the 100-page machine learning one, but I had another one scheduled. And let me just get situated here. I thought I was set up, but I had the wrong link for something up. Also, if you can see and hear me in the chat, let me know. I'll let you know how to join this shortly as well. And I know the last couple times I had some internet issue. Hopefully my video is showing up this time. I've done some streams in the last month from a different account, but still on StreamYard, which we're using, and they were all fine. So let me know if there's any issues this time. And I'm not sure what else to fix. I got a new router. I'm closer to it. Seems like I should have fine internet, but something was going on last time. I'm not too far from my router, so it should be fine. But again, let me know if video isn't showing up or audio is weird. All right, I see people here. People are saying hello. Thanks for showing up. And they can hear us. Awesome, cool. And the link is right in me. Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I had a live link up, and it was the wrong one when I was making sure I was going live. So I thought maybe I had that same link up the whole time, and was wrong. Cool. And I have. All right. I am set up. I'm going to go through some slides. And also, if you've been here before, you can come and join the conversation. One, a lot of people like to keep it in the chat, which is totally fine. And I have it now, so the chat shows up on screen, which I think people liked that and found engaging last time. It's a beta feature in here, so it's kind of small. I don't think I can change the size of it yet. But I will also read out like any interesting comments that people have. And then a lot of people like to discuss in there, which is great. But also, if you want to come join the stream, you don't have to turn on your video if you just want to do audio. I will share a link out shortly as kind of part of the intro here, if you want to come join and actually join the stream and conversation and have a discussion up here. But I know a lot of people also like to engage in the chat, and that's totally fine too. So whatever way you want, but it is more fun if it's not always just me up here speaking sometimes, I think. So if you want to come join, I'll share a link here shortly. Actually, yeah, let me do the quick intro, and then I'll share the link if that works with everyone. So this month's book club, if you're new here, we've been reading a book every single month. We did it last year, and we've been doing it every month this year as well. This month we read the 100-page language models book. Usually this event is later in the month as well. Like I try to do the last Tuesday of every month, but I'm going on vacation earlier or later this week. So I wanted to still read a book in June, but it's a much shorter book than normal, which is the 100-page language model book, which was a really good introduction to language models. And we'll obviously talk about that today. Again, in short, we read a new book every month. And sometimes we discuss it in Slack as well. A lot of people save the conversation for the live events, but I do want to try to get more discussion going on in the Slack. So there's a Slack called Building AI Together. It started as our open source community for Flight, which is an open source orchestration platform, but you can go join and just look for the AI Reading Club channel. And I try to share any of the interesting links that we accumulate kind of during these discussions in there as well. I also started a GitHub. Then I'm keeping up to date with all the upcoming books. Oh, and I realized when I share a link in StreamYard, it's not going to LinkedIn. So I'm going to reshare these links. Sorry. And I know also the slides don't have much in here, but some people do want the link to the slides. So I'm going to share that as well in the chat if people do want to check it out. And so far for this year, we've read these books. January was Building LLMs for Production. February was RAG-Driven Generative AI. March was AI Engineering. April was AI agents in action. May was hands-on APIs for data, or for AI and data science. And then we're reading the 100-page language model book right now. And then July, we have scheduled reinforcement learning for finance. And then August, we have building agentic AI systems. And then September, I didn't post this event yet, but I think we're going to read effective conversational AI. Seems really interesting, kind of about putting chat models and interfaces in production, how to think about it. I just read the chapter titles. I didn't actually read the book yet, but it looked really good. It might be a really good add-on for kind of all the stuff we've covered so far. If you're putting any of this stuff in production, had really interesting ways, at least again from the chapter titles, of how to think and frame, like how to get user feedback and interesting stuff like having a chatbot in production that actually does something useful for people. I thought it was pretty interesting looking. And then what should we read next? So let me know in the chat or when you come up here if you want to come join the discussion, which actually I'll share that link now. It's okay if you just want to stay in the chat as well, but usually one or two other people end up coming up here saying hello. Again, you don't have to turn on your video if you don't want to. You can just leave an audio discussion as well. So I'm going to share that link in the chat. You can join that and come join me on stage here for the discussion. But what book should we read next? There's a whole bunch coming out. A lot of them sound really interesting. So these ones at the bottom are an early release. I think some of them start coming out supposedly in July. I didn't want to schedule them until they actually come out because it is pretty common where they get months delayed. So for example, I think LLMs is supposed to come out in July. It looks really good. I want to read it, but I did want to wait for it to actually be released before we schedule the event. So I'm going to wait for it to come out. If it does come out, maybe that'll be after September, but a lot of these books sound really fun. Any other books people have seen that they'd want to add to the list at all? And usually I think there's like sometimes a 30-second delay or something after I say something before it actually gets to people streaming sometimes. So I do want to just leave it up in the chat, like if there's any other books you've seen or that are in this list that sound super interesting to you. Let me know, because we can add them to the list. And out of these ones up here, which would you want to read next? Even if you don't have any others in mind, what other ones would you want to kind of read next? While you're thinking about that, I'm going to get a drink of water. If you don't have an opinion, then I'll choose them later. Someone said the biology one is outside their expertise, but would probably be really interesting. That's how I feel too. Like, I'm not a biologist. Some of customers I work with are in that space, and I always find it interesting. I'm definitely interested about that one too. So when that one comes out, that's on my short list to add. I think that one also maybe is supposedly being finished in July. So I'll keep an eye on all these ones, and I think as they come out, a lot of them sound interesting. Especially, I think the ones in production, like building applications with AI agents, the biology, LLMs, and vector databases are all super relevant. So it's a vector databases, building applications with AI agents, LLMs. Yep, I think this one will go in sooner. I think this one isn't supposedly slated till October. And like I said, sometimes there could be months of delay. And I know in 2026, there's a whole bunch more. I saw O'Reilly just recently planned to release. So there's a whole bunch coming out in 2026 that I don't even have here, like one on vision language models, which I'm sure is going to be really, really cool. As they come out, I'll let people know. Someone said the graph neural networks in action seems interesting. That one also sounds pretty cool. And that one is out now, so we could add that one in sooner than later if we wanted. So thank you. I'll keep all this feedback in mind. And Kevin asks, is anyone working on a big project? You could also describe, I guess, what a big project is for you. Might be useful for people. All right, so people have probably already figured this out, the format. So people are talking live in the chat. That's awesome. If you want to join, I did share the link in the LinkedIn chat. If you want to come join the stage here with me and do discussion in either audio, or you can turn on your video if you want. Otherwise, you're also welcome to keep talking in the chat. And then the recordings are going to be at where you're at. So some people do like watching the recordings later. You can find it on LinkedIn and YouTube. So whatever you're streaming on right now, it'll be at the same link if you want to come check back later. So this book, like we mentioned, was the 100-page language models book. It's very short. It's just over 100 pages. It's like 100 and let me get the exact count, 130 pages or something like that. Yeah, I think just over 130 pages. Like someone said, it's only 100 pages, but they couldn't finish it. It's very dense. So there's I've read his book that was a 100-page. I gave it to someone, so I don't have it actually up here anymore. But it's a 100-page, I think, machine learning book is what it was called, and it was really good. It was somewhat early-ish when I was getting started in machine learning, and I thought it just had really, really good, concise explanations of a lot of the basic model types. And he does a really good job of breaking down what it's doing conceptually, and then showing like math behind it, and then implementing it in code. At least in this one, I don't remember if the other one had code examples for them all, but this one talks about conceptually what's happening, shows a whole bunch of math formulas, and then usually has implementations in PyTorch or Python, which was really good. I also think this had some of my favorite like visualizations, and the printing is really nice in this. So like if you like, actually I only have the hard copy of the book. I don't have the PDF one. Let me find a cool visualization just to preview to people. So if you haven't bought the book yet and you want to, you can get like online versions, like in a PDF format or printed. This has like some of the best like printing I've seen, I feel like, in books. Let me find a cool graph real quick. I don't know if this will show up on camera, but it just has a really good job of illustrating. Like, I think this was the multi-head transformer. He has really, really good graphics. So if you're kind of new and diving deeper into like transformers and how they work, like kind of under the hood, this is a really good, like I said, kind of short but really, really dense explanation of everything. It's only 6 chapters, 130 pages. Starts with machine learning basics in chapter 1. Language 2 goes to language modeling basics. 3 is recurrent neural networks. 4 is transformer, and 5 is large language models, and then 6 is further reading. Oh, someone said Andriy is actually in the chat. You're also, I shared the live link here. Welcome to join the live stream if you want to as well. Let me see what he said earlier. Yeah, sometimes we've actually had the authors of several of the books come up, which, again, I didn't schedule anything, so no pressure. I might have just said hello, maybe not sticking around. But we have had in the past, actually, several of the authors come in while we're doing the conversations, which is really fun. So it's really fun to ask them questions and kind of hear what they were thinking about when they're writing the book. Someone said, okay, they can see the chat on Discord, LinkedIn, and meetups, but still don't know where the comment stream overlay on the video is coming from. The comment stream is coming from LinkedIn chat or from YouTube. Should show both, but I think most people are chatting on LinkedIn. It's kind of where I pushed everyone because most people seem the most active on there. And for you, it says LinkedIn user because you have some setting that doesn't show your name outside. So I have to go to the actual LinkedIn, see that, oh, this is Steven. How's it going, Steven? Or wait, was that the last person in the chat? Yeah, someone said it's on LinkedIn with a delay. That makes sense. So usually even the streaming sometimes has a delay as well. So it said they're on LinkedIn. I'm not sure. Maybe you're not seeing the chat. That is the LinkedIn chat. You're showing up in the chat feed. So it said, is there a Discord? There is not a Discord, but there's a Slack link. And if you want to introduce yourself there, I'll share this link in the chat. If you want to share an introduction there more permanently, and there's also AI Reading Club channel in there. If you want to discuss any of the upcoming books kind of asynchronously outside of these live events, we can do that there. So again, usually we'll have someone join me. Usually there's kind of a co-host with me too. If you've come before, you're probably familiar with Sige. I know he's had some other stuff going on right now. So he might not be able to join this week again, which is sad because I love having a co-host up here with me. So again, I did share the link in the chat if anyone wants to come and join the conversation and help steer the conversation too. I know some people are like, oh, they were talking about not what I want to talk about. Well, you can either come up or help steer it from the discussion in the chat too. And again, this is kind of a shorter book, so we might even have a shorter meetup today if there isn't a lot of specific questions or anything people want to kind of dive deeper into. And then I broke these chapters out into subsections. Usually formatting's a little off here, but chapter 1, these are kind of the sub chapters in there, so I'll usually go over that if that kicks any ideas of what people want to discuss or they have questions about. Again, you could join here or put it in the chat. So chapter 1 was machine learning basics, and then kind of these are the sub chapters in there. Talks about AI machine learning. Again, starts from assuming you might not know a lot about it, what a model is, has the 4-step ML process. Actually, would have to refresh what that is real quick. But I think it's taking data, training on it, evaluating it, probably something like that. What a vector is, an introduction to neural networks. What a matrix is, how gradient descent works, how autograd or automatic differentiation works. Again, these are kind of really concise, condensed examples. And then chapter 2 has language modeling basics. Starts with bag of words, word embeddings, byte pair encoding, language model, count-based language models, evaluating language models. I thought this was pretty interesting when I was going through data science stuff years ago. Like everyone was talking about, bag of words and these earlier kind of models, which were pretty good, or they worked good enough at the time for a lot of stuff, not nearly on the same length as where like transformers and large language models are today, but it's kind of cool to see that brought up again. Byte pair encoding, which is a way of tokenizing your text into different pairs. And then I actually thought the evaluating language model chapter, I'm glad he had that in there too. There's a whole bunch of different metrics that you can use and look at, and we've talked about some of those in previous book clubs if you've been here. This one mostly focused on using the perplexity score, and then also there's another score called Rouge, and they had different variations of it. They work pretty well for different things. Like I think it's Rouge. I could be wrong. Rouge is really good for like summarization type of stuff, seeing how well the output relates to the input. I think perplexity score works more on generation. I could have that backwards. And then chapter 3 was recurrent neural networks. If you're newer to large language models, maybe you haven't looked at RNNs before, but they were the popular model several years ago before ChatGPT 3 came out, and kind of, well, actually, I would say BERT was the thing that was really pushing transformers at first. Like BERT models were coming out. People were using them for really interesting stuff before they had recurrent neural networks. Oh, and there's actually 2 that were mentioned in the book. I wanted to bring up what they were. I need to get the papers, and I'll put them in the Slack later if I find them. There's 2 mentioned. If I can find them real quick, I'll call them out by name, because I made a mark that I want to go read these papers later. Let's see. Recurrent neural networks. Has anyone built an RNN before? I did a long time ago going through a course. Like I almost feel like 4 years ago or more at this point. Let me find. There was a note. It was interesting because there's newer RNNs that show a lot of promise. Yeah, I can't find it. I know I circled them. If I don't find them in the next second, I'll put them in the Slack later. Okay, yeah, here they are. Mini LSTM, which is long short-term memory, is what LSTM stands for. And then there's one called XLSTM. And they said that these were in 2024, and those architectures, I guess, apparently achieve performance comparable to a lot of transformer-based models. And they also just note in there, which I thought was pretty fun too, about how kind of just shows to show like certain types of architectures and models almost never really die. They stick around for a long time and just kind of evolve. I think they even mentioned logistic regression, which is a really, really old model in like classical ML type of stuff, and how it's still one of the most widely used models probably in production right now. But I'll go find papers for those later and share them in the Slack, because I wanted to go look them up and kind of see what's going on. And then chapter number 4, this was one of my favorites, and I manually typed these out, so there's some typos here. This chapter was really good. Like I said, really good illustrations. I thought they did a really good job of breaking down kind of all the blocks in the transformer architecture, specifically in decoder transformers. They broke it apart with a decoder block, self-attention with key value query pairs, position-wise multi-layer perceptron, rotary position embedding. I thought that was interesting, seeing kind of the math behind it. I never really seen it broken down that way that I recall. Multi-head attention, residual connection, kind of how you beat the vanishing gradient problem within transformers. So kind of you just have some skip layers where you're adding in kind of the input back over to another layer with the output of a previous layer. Root mean normalization, key value caching, and then you implement this in Python with PyTorch. So again, actually, I didn't share the link to the GitHub. So even if you didn't read the book, the GitHub is available for you to check out. And Sen said this was their favorite chapter 2. They didn't finish it, but learned so much here. Yeah, that was really good. And there's even some parts where, like, I've used transformers, implemented a lot of stuff. But you know, even though I think I've read the paper a while ago, there's parts that I kind of skip over in my brain somewhat. And this just did a really good job of breaking it down. And there's some parts that later I'll probably go back over too. Again, check out great illustrations if you want to get the book showing how all the matrices come in and what they look like once you use like the query key value matrices on them. I thought that was really good. Again, I hadn't seen a breakdown with that good a visual before, I don't think. But like I mentioned, then you get to implement it in PyTorch. So his books, again, are really good. Again, they go through conceptually, have really good graphics. They have math in it, and then they usually have code implementations of a lot of the stuff. So they continued on with that in this book. And I think actually, I think he might be working on a 100-page reinforcement learning book, which I'm really excited about to see, again, kind of like a condensed version of getting started in reinforcement learning. Then chapter 5 was large language models. So building these with transformers, talks about why larger is better with all the parameters, supervised fine-tuning, how they learn from the text, fine-tuning a pre-trained model. This talks a lot about like instruction fine-tuning and shows an example where like I've done this before, where I've taken an open source model like Gemma on Hugging Face, and I did not select the instruction fine-tune one, and I was trying to use it, and the output is pretty awful. So this shows like a good comparison to that. Like you have this pre-trained model, knows how to predict next tokens, but it doesn't really understand how to answer things in the format you want. So then you want to do something like instruction fine-tuning and get formatted answers. And if you haven't done this before, it is really fun to kind of get one of the ones that isn't instruction fine-tuned and then see how weirdly it answers with you. And then it talks about low rank adaptation or low rank adapters, which is a form of training with like lesser amount of RAM and GPU. I don't know if anyone's done this before. I have. There's really good libraries. I think they even show a brief example of using this with PEFT, Parameter Efficient Fine-Tuning Library, which I think is by Hugging Face as well. And they make it real easy to do low rank adaptation training. But basically what you're doing there is you're inserting matrices on usually it's on the key value and query weights that are talked about earlier in the book. But you're basically putting smaller versions of those matrices in there. And then you just have to update those weights, not the other weights in your model. So it ends up being a lot of space you can save in your GPU for updating those weights versus the whole model. There's also another version of this. I think they mentioned briefly, they don't show it in action, called QLoRa. So you can quantize the model so it's smaller, load it into your GPU. So if you have a smaller GPU, and then you can do LoRa training with a quantized model. But then you take those weights that you trained on, you merge those back into the full size model. So it's a way of doing more efficient training. Again, with that, there's trade-offs. Like it might not learn as much if you're not updating all the weights, for example. Then it talks about training LLM as a classifier. If you haven't done this before, like BERT models are really good at this, and they're a lot lighter weight. So actually, instead of doing LoRa, you can often even do full fine tuning on them. Like I think Distilbert, it's like 110 million parameters. You can train that as a classifier. And then if you're running this thousands or millions of times on like sentiment, for example, like I think actually in like a year ago, I don't know what they're still using, but like Twitter, for example, I know was using like BERT models at some point to do classification, if they're like harassment tweets or sentiment on them. I think they're using BERT models a long time ago. So if you're doing these at scale, you don't want to do a call to an API that you don't own. So this is pretty cool. If you haven't trained an LLM for a classifier, definitely recommend doing that at some point if you think it's interesting as well. And then briefly talks about prompt engineering, hallucinations, LMs, copyrights and ethics. And then in the chapter 6, the further reading, it kind of points you to other interesting stuff that you might want to read that's not really covered in the book, like mixture of experts, model merging, model compression, and usually has like a paragraph on all of these in the book. Preference-based alignment, advanced reasoning, language model security, vision language models, prevent overfitting, concluding remarks, and then more from the author. I think he has 2 other books, the 100-page machine learning book, like I mentioned, and then he actually has another one just called Machine Learning that goes a little bit deeper. It's not 100 pages, it's more, but it contains quite a bit more. Someone said they thought LoRa was for diffusion models. You can use it for diffusion models as well. I forget what a diffusion model matrix looks like or what the weights look like there, but it's the same concept where you're basically just inserting smaller weights into an existing model. And then you can update those weights versus the full fine-tuned model, which again saves you a lot of space usually or computation. So you can use it on like a smaller GPU. And then the other cool thing about that, and this comes into play a lot with diffusion models that I've seen, is you can train a LoRa adapter. And then basically you can take that adapter and like give it to someone else and they can just insert it into models, or you can insert a different LoRa adapter into the same model. So you have like the full model here, different LoRa adapters that you trained on different data sets. You can use that one full model and then just swap out LoRa adapters. And so I see this a lot with like diffusion models where I think you can train LoRas and like host them for free places I think I've seen. And then you can download them and insert them into a diffusion model. So you could do it with diffusion models and with large language models. But it's just a way of making a smaller matrix and then inserting it into a larger model and updating that instead of the full weights. And then again, like I was saying, you can remove them and add them in, which is kind of cool. And that was the book. So again, I'll share the link one more time if people do want to come up here and join the studio. Otherwise, again, you're welcome to keep it in chat as well. And like I said, this is a shorter book, and it could be a shorter meetup if people wanted today as well. And also can open up for stuff outside of what was covered in the book. Like if people want to talk about what they're working on, I think that's always interesting to hear about as well. Do you have any specific problems in the space that you're like looking to solve with, data or LLMs, or are you building agents right now? Are you building RAG applications? What kind of tools are you using? I always love hearing about that stuff as well. So if people want to share in the chat or join the stream and share any of those things, do so as well. One thing I've been doing is playing around with different agent frameworks for some stuff and evaluating which ones I like, if I feel like I need one all the time. It's not that crazy most of the time to build kind of your own loop for your LM to do tool calling, what I found anyway. So playing around with that, and I think it's pretty interesting. Like building an agent without an agent framework has been a fun learning experience. And then I even started adding some stuff in where, oh cool, we got someone joining real quick. Welcome up, Cody.
Hey, Sage. Yeah, I wanted to join because this is actually my first time attending.
Welcome.
Yeah, I didn't actually read this particular book, but I didn't want to let that stop me. And I was looking a little bit at the synopsis, and one thing that was particularly interesting to me, because I'm kind of approaching this more as like a product builder perspective, is when building with LLMs, consistency can be a real challenge. And like a couple of kind of examples that came up in the synopsis that I grabbed from ChatGPT earlier was that you can get some explicit examples in your prompt to improve the consistency. And I was just kind of wondering if any other if you could like kind of speak to that. Like, are there any other tips that they offered to improve consistency?
Yeah, and I don't think this book goes super deep into it, but some of the other books we've read and other stuff online has a bit more in the past. And you're right. I think the consistency piece that just for my use as well, adding examples in, doing usually it's like what do they call that? Not zero shot, multi-shot examples or whatever. It just directly into your prompt can help a lot. So like if you're expecting a specific format, instead of prompting it to it, you say like, here's an example, like always put in this format, or sometimes you do that if you're doing like classification and you say this is this sentiment or something like that and give it direct examples. That can help a lot for sure. The other thing is fine tuning can also help with that, but it depends on what you're doing and like how much data you already have for that. So it's pretty common that people start with like a big foundation model, like a GPT API. And if you're just doing, let's say your example is doing classification, it might work really well for it. And you can give it the multi-shot examples in your prompt and it might do really good. But then over time, like we had mentioned towards the end, like if you're doing this analysis, I don't know if yours is on classification, but if you're doing classification like that, and you start collecting a lot of production data, then you could probably fine tune like a smaller model and it might even do a better job because it actually like has learned from that data. And then also can often be cheaper to do it like to run inference on that smaller model.
Okay. Yeah, I was listening to a conversation on Y Combinator yesterday about basically this problem. And he brought up a term that I'd heard in like a totally different context, but which is like federated like models, basically like a federated architecture. And because like I ran into this consistency problem when I was just kind of building a project where I take all of my incoming emails, send them to a local LLM, and then it makes some judgment calls on like whether to notify the user or not. And I noticed every now and then it would just break. And when looking into what happened, it's because the LLM basically gave some anomaly as the output.
Mm.
And his suggestion basically was like, if you think about this federated model where you've got, I don't know if you want to think of it as like multiple agents or really just, querying the same model multiple times, you can kind of like statistically get rid of those anomalies because it's very unlikely that they'll happen like 3 or 4 or 5 times.
Right,
And then you,
right.
you just take basically the response that, is either the best or just the most common.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. There's also because it sounds like you're talking about something different than federated learning. I have to look that up. Federated, what was it? Architecture for like kind of for it almost sounds like it's like a self-supervised learning process, but like federated or something.
Yeah, yeah, he was talking specifically about like kind of designing agentic workflows. I can shoot you the link to the
Oh yeah,
podcast
yeah, yeah.
later
That'd
if
be
you're
cool.
interested.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That'd be great.
Yeah,
I'll
the specific space that I'm kind of thinking about building in now is actually for therapists. So that's kind of
mm,
where my head has been recently is on, solo practitioners. Yeah, kind of in the problem discovery phase.
yeah, and one thing to think a lot about probably with something like that too is like as you're doing stuff to try to improve the consistency, like whether that's adjusting your prompt or fine tuning or anything like that, you also want to think about how to just do evaluations if you haven't done that yet. And like there's a whole bunch of different ways of doing this, and there's no silver bullet from what I've seen that is the best way for everything. So you might have to experiment around with your use case. But one thing for that is like you can have kind of a golden standard of a data set that you always want to run against like your new version of the prompt or anything like that, and then see how it responds. And this data set could be pretty large, and you can keep growing it, and then see whatever metrics you think would be good, or you might manually look at the responses. You'll probably want to have something like that too as you keep experimenting with like how to improve it.
Okay, that's a good call. Yeah, and there has been a bunch of just talk in the space about evals and
Yep.
the importance of it, and also the difficulty of that. That would probably be a good topic of conversation, or even like if there was a book specifically on, writing evals in the
Yeah.
LLM world, I would read that.
Yeah, I haven't seen a whole book on it, but there should be. But I think everyone's still figuring it out. A lot of books do mention it. Like we read AI Engineering by Chip recently, and it mentions like a lot about it. I would go look at right now these companies that are working in the space, like that's their whole business. Rise is one. You should be able to go to Rise. Yeah, rise.com. I wasn't sure if it was a Rise or I wasn't sure if it was .com or .ai. Rise.com. They are, I think, from what I've seen, like one of the best in kind of pushing a lot of boundaries there. They have like a tool for it, but they also have an open source tool called Phoenix for LLM specifically, and you can trace like prompts and responses for it. And then there's different metrics you can pull out too. So right now it seems like two, and people in the chat, you should weigh in as well, even if you don't join here. If you want to put in the chat, if you've done a lot with evaluating, because there's different metrics you can pull out. And one thing too people are doing is using another LM as a judge, which is interesting, and it seems like there's really good results with it. But it is interesting because then you have another LM, and it's like, are you evaluating that LM as well? You kind of get in this interesting loop. But it's had really good results from what I've seen, and I know Rise has some stuff built in for different types of metrics, but I think also using LM as a judge.
Yeah, yeah, it's so interesting to think about this like quality control problem that we're all faced with now.
Yep.
And then yeah, if like you basically just spin up a new AI agent to serve that role, well, it's like who's monitoring the quality of that?
Yep.
But yeah, but I mean, I suppose, and the kind of person I was listening to speak yesterday made this same point where it's like people sometimes think that the standard that these businesses are waiting on to start implementing AI is like some 100% perfect, but that's just not realistic. And that's not even like the current world that we live in. It's like sometimes employees do make mistakes. And, even if the stakes are high and, you've got like a compliance issue, then it's like, okay, well, if one time out of 100 you fall out of compliance, then maybe these AI models just need to be 10 times better to enter production, but there will still be mistakes.
Oh, for sure. For sure. There's some other ones I know, like Galileo. They seem to be doing cool stuff in the space. Lang Smith, I haven't kept up with them. That's like Lang Chain's kind of monitoring service. I don't know how much it does versus monitoring versus like traces. So like they're a good way though. I know that you can at least set up where it tracks like prompts and responses, and then you can go edit those responses and then make that like a training data set later. But I think they do some form of kind of monitoring with that as well. But someone correct me if I'm wrong. Someone had a good point. Oh, let me see if I can actually highlight it in here. So what about adding evaluating agent to check responses before sending it out? So it's just like we were saying, kind of like that's adding another LM in a way to it, which can be really good. I think there's been really good results for it. It is just interesting. It's like another layer, and then it's like who's monitoring the monitor kind of thing.
Yeah, you have like one AI who's fine-tuned or prompted basically to be creative and to generate something, and then another one that's really fine-tuned to be very critical and look at this and be like, okay, well, based on the standards, is like what problems are
Yep.
here.
But you can have there's really good results too. Actually, going on to like what David said, for example, you could fine tune like a BERT model, like we were talking about, that can be really good at classification, and you could have it have different classes of like sentiment or what type of response. Like, does it fall into your like I think you were talking about therapists? Does it fall into a space that it should be talking about? Does it go into a very different topic that it shouldn't be talking about? Like, should it be able to tell you how to do taxes? Maybe not. And so like you can add in different guardrails that say like, oh, this just isn't an appropriate topic. Like, don't send that back. And then you can also add in other things like sentiment score, readability. There's other metrics too that are lightweight that you can use like NLTK library to extract and do some quick check on. For example, like there's some other like kind of old NLP scores that are like readability, maybe also character length. For example, if you're doing like a summarization app and you want to make sure it's always under a certain amount of characters, so you can think about like your problem space sometimes and see if there's any other metrics. So like if it's a therapist, I'm making this up, I don't work in the space, so I don't know what's good for it, but if there's some sort of like empathy score or something like that, they didn't extract out of the response, like, oh, that's really negative, like you don't want to send that to your client or something like that. There's different scores you can think about, and then you could have different models that might be able to be and act as like a guardrail in there.
Yeah, I
And
like that.
and some of these like Arise and stuff have ways of like you can add those metrics in and then monitor those over time. So like you can kind of see like if you're monitoring all the responses from your model and it's all within a certain range of something, and then all of a sudden it spikes way up or down or something like that, that could be an indicator something's going wrong, or it's just a good indicator to go look at it. And you might go look at the prompts coming in and you found that the person using it was kind of getting it to be really rude or something like that. There's other stuff too, like pattern matching is a simple one. But you might look at like, is your LM generating phone numbers or credit card numbers or anything like that? And sometimes you might want that for like PII type of stuff, like it shouldn't leak that out. But also I've seen that be really useful for just I think I was working with someone and they were doing a chatbot for like a store, and because we had these metrics built in to catch it, it just flagged like, oh, phone number was generated, and we're like, oh, interesting, we never told it a phone number to give. And there was like a customer that was angry, and I said, oh, you're angry, it called this number, and it just made up a phone number. So like so like you wouldn't want, like, again, if you're a therapist chatbot or something, it's like, oh, call this hotline or something, and it's like a made up number or something awful. Like there's different patterns and stuff you can add in to at least be like flag you or act as like guardrails in there.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. Think ahead and kind of build in some semantic guardrails. Like it seems like that's exactly what ChatGPT has had to do because, obviously there are certain things that it doesn't want it discussing
Yep.
or, it could be really problematic.
Yeah, and they probably have some other model that says they probably do multiple things. Like there's keyword searching, there's models that can classify it. One thing I've actually seen that was pretty useful, at least earlier, there might be a better way now, was even just doing like an embedding to a list of problematic like terms and responses or something. So like you could have a growing list of like, these are all things I don't want you to talk about, or here's a growing list of like jailbreak prompts. And when a prompt coming in is very similar to one of these other ones, maybe ignore it or know that it might be a jailbreak. And what I'd often like to do in that case is actually let the LM generate a response, but don't send that response to the person. So like you can have it log and be like, what did it generate when it got that type of thing? Like, was it actually jailbreak, or was it able to not be jailbroken? But then I never send that response to the end user. I would just log that for myself, and then I could go like figure out what was going on or use it as training data somewhere.
Yeah.
David said, yeah, LOL, infinite agents. Yeah, so just be agents all the way to, you got to have an evaluation agent, the agent evaluating agent, and just, yeah, keep stacking them. Someone said, is there a repository to learn about standard practices on LM agentic evaluation? Do we have any standard sets? I know that there are some sets. I don't have them right now. I'll go try to pull them up later that are on like Hugging Face. Again, like I haven't seen something that's just like a fit all for everything, but I think there are some evaluation sets that might be fun to look at if you haven't looked at them yet. Like you could Google agentic evaluation sets on Hugging Face. And in fact, there's one that's part of their course. I can try and see if I can bring that up real quick. Let me just get the other questions first. Oh, David said that's one way to deal with a customer. Just pass them to a fake phone number. And Kevin said, judging a data set with results displayed in a table can be addressed by multiple models, judging output against a data set, and then displayed in the table is more challenging at scale. And it's hard to do a lot of the stuff at scale with LMs. Let me see if I can pull up. Again, I think this is evolving and changing all the time, but I know that there was kind of a common agent evaluation data set that people were using for a while. Let me see if I can find that real quick. And Hugging Face actually has let's see, I'll share this link in the chat. And I'll share these in the Slack later too. I don't know if this is the one I'm thinking of. They have a whole section with like evaluation stuff, it looks like. But if you go to their courses, see, Hugging Face course, there's actually an agent course that came out recently. And the end project, which I haven't done yet, and I do want to do, is basically doing good enough on an evaluation score. That is kind of, I think, used right now to see how good agents are in general tasks. So obviously, your agents probably are going to be more specialized in production. I think also I've seen so many studies about like a specialized multi-agent system is usually better than just one general agent. So here is a section I'll share in the chat as well on Hugging Face for you to go check out on the evaluation piece. It's basically the last project in their course is you have to build an agent that gets a above certain score in there. But yeah, these are really, really good questions in really interesting space. Yeah, and I worked in the evaluation space for a couple years, but only for several months when like GPT came out, which like I was more in traditional ML type of evaluation, like measuring data drift, model drift, and then a lot of that relates to LMs. But because you have more unstructured inputs and outputs, it's really hard to get a good evaluation. It's not like getting classification or something. And that's why I've looked at and familiar with like Galileo, Langsmith. I know there's other ones. I haven't kept up with what they're doing with LMs, but I'm sure they are doing stuff like Fiddler is another one. I think Aporia is another one. These are all companies you can go look at. And a lot of these companies I find just have really good resources because they're kind of building stuff on the cutting edge for that space. So if you go read their latest blogs and play around with their latest features, they're probably going to give you a good idea of what's going on versus like a book that was even written months ago in the space can really easily be outdated already. And I'm not sure too, Cody, like for your case, if this fits well with it too. I don't think we mentioned RAG here yet either. So like using the retrieval augmented generation, like you might be able to pull in kind of like almost like instead of having it baked into your prompt, you could have like a history of really good responses to prompts or something like that, and maybe pull that in to help with your answer. That would be something that I would maybe look at as well.
Yeah, so I feel like I kind of missed the boat on RAG, actually. I keep hearing it brought up, but I don't think I have a very good understanding of what it means.
Oh yeah, sure. And it's not, I don't think it's mentioned in this book. They might mention it maybe later, but it's not really covered. Basically, you have some sort of documents. So a lot of times, like people have, I don't know, a whole bunch of work history, or let's bring up this theoretical case of like you have conversations with therapists and clients. And again, I don't work in the space, so I don't know if you can do this or whatever. But theoretically, you have like this history that you want to be able to query from. And or I guess a good use case is actually like Wikipedia, for example. It has a whole bunch of information in there. In this case, I guess LLMs were maybe fine-tuned on it, so maybe it's not a good use case. We have some form of documents, and you want to be able to bring that document knowledge into your LLM to help generate a response. So what usually happens is you set up a vector database or store your data in a way where like you have these documents, you usually break them up into chunks, and then you store those chunks into a vector database or some database that you can query with a vector. That just means that like when someone does the prompt to your LLM, it can go say, what knowledge do I have stored like in my vector database that maybe looks similar to the prompt coming in? So if I had documents on wildlife or something like that, and it said like the habitats they live in and like what they eat, and someone was saying like, what do lions eat? And I have a document that has that knowledge, then I'll basically be able to retrieve that based on like kind of a similarity search, pull that in, and then give it as a prompt to my large language model. So then you would combine them in different ways. It's up to you how you want to combine them, but you could say something like, the user asked, what do lions eat? And I also fetched this extra text from my data store, and I pulled it in, and it says lions eat, whatever type of meat or something like that. And then it generates a response based on the user query and whatever knowledge it pulled in. So you could have something that's like, someone asked about this thing. Previously, when people have asked about that, like we have a log of these conversations, and this is deemed like a hand labeled one from you that this went well or something like that, and you could potentially pull that in.
Okay. Yeah. So if like in the context of like a tool for lawyers, it's like you've got sort of the facts that are relevant to the case you're working on,
Yeah.
but then you've got this huge like corpus of case history, and
Yeah.
you want to be able to like retrieve anything that's relevant.
Yeah. Lawyer example is even better. That's a great example. And there's different ways of doing RAG. There's like so many different ways of formatting and storing it. So like you can look at all these different ways. And there's something called graph RAG, which is often usually done as a hybrid RAG where you use like a vector database and then a graph database. And so going back to the lawyer cases is really good for that. You query something and it brings in like relevant cases, and then it can actually use a graph to kind of see what other cases those are related to. So like it builds out, like if you've seen graphs before, right, you have nodes that point
Yeah.
at different things. So then it can know to, okay, it pulled up this one, well, let's go look at like the 3 next nodes that this case relates to or something, and then bring that in as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And it's it seems like really good for a lot of stuff. Obviously you can also try to fine tune on that data. Even if you do fine tune, you might want to bring those in. And an important part about that too is when you're bringing stuff in, like in the lawyer use case, you can actually cite where the information came in from too. So if you have those cases, you could say, hey, I read these cases, or I brought in these cases to form this opinion. You should go look at them and double check or something like that, right? Because like obviously LLMs hallucinate, it's a big problem. But you could have it actually cite resources where it pulled from in this case.
Yeah. Cool.
And yeah, so it's really good for that. Really good for bringing in knowledge that's newer as well, right? Like you might not be always fine tuning every single hour on all the new stuff. So like when you do a Google search and it uses LM, it's not always fine tuned on it, but can pull in like the best or the top results and then make an answer based on that.
Mm-hmm.
So Alyssa said, for the math nerds, I especially find vector databases super interesting as they use cosine similarities. And they mentioned, that's right, in the book, they actually mentioned cosine similarities, where you're looking at how similar the vectors are to each other. But I don't recall if they talk about RAG much in here. They've got it. They probably mention it somewhere later. And then also, people always love to say every day when a new model comes out with longer context that RAG is dead, but I don't think so. I think you're always going to have, or not always, but a lot of times you're going to have some sort of retrieval process in. Also, from what I've seen, there's still a lot of stuff saying, like one, you might not always want to pay for tokens of loading all the data into your prompt and doing a query that way. I think it might add to latency as well. But also, there's a lot of stuff that I've seen, and that just from my usage of GPT and stuff and LMs, that it seems like when you have so much context, it doesn't always do better answers with it. Like it's better sometimes to have the more refined like content that you would pull in from RAG and then have it generate an answer. But they are super cool. There's also just a ton of different vector databases to check out. So like I was saying, companies building this stuff often have some of the most up-to-date resources. I could pull up or make another text box maybe. Where's my text box thing? Let me just copy this. As I say, there's like Weaviate. Does anyone have any others they know about? So Weaviate, Pinecone. These are all vector database companies you go look at because they're going to have really good sources on it probably. I know there's a whole bunch, and why am I blanking? Oh, I think Quadrant. Mongo, you might not know them for a vector database, but I know they have a lot of cool vector features now, if they didn't already before, and now they're pushing it in the Gen AI space. Also, like Postgres does so too. So like you can look at PG vector. I think most vector databases or most traditional databases have like vector plugins where you can store the embeddings and then query them like a vector database. What are some other ones? Oh, Chroma is a popular embedded one. You'll often see examples with that. Theus, which is Facebook AI something. Yeah. David said Postgres now does vector. Yeah, I think like a lot of them will. Like you could go look up probably a whole bunch of traditional databases, and they probably all have some sort of plugin or feature for that now. So this is PG is Postgres. If you've done development before, you're probably familiar with Postgres database, but yeah, so they have a way to work with it. Weavy has some cool features, and they have an embedded version of Weavy 8 now, which I've been playing around with. So if you do want to start locally and use like your own little vector database that you're hosting, but then if you want to scale out into like a paid Weavy 8 thing, they make it really easy to experiment with embedded, which I think is really cool. So like a lot of people have used like Chroma in examples, or Theus. I think it's actually 2 S's. But if you want to fiddle around with something like that, but then be able to scale when you want to, I think you can do that with Weavy 8 now. Kevin said having very large context length, 1 million plus tokens may reduce the need for RAG. It might in some use cases, but like I was saying, I still think there's a lot of times where you don't want to load in all of your documents. And going back to the evaluation piece, you'd also want to evaluate, does having a more specialized amount of text versus all the text give you better responses? I know from some of the stuff I've read, it seems like it does. And then also, you're just still retrieving from somewhere. It's like, are you just going to load in every single thing every time? And then also, if you're paying for LLM calls like on GPT, usually it's cost per token. So if you're doing something like that at scale, like a lot of times maybe it doesn't matter for use case, but if you're doing it repeatedly over and over again, that's compute cost too that you're paying for. So you might want to scale down the amount of tokens you're passing in. And even like if you mess around with just your chatbot like GPT or Claude or something like that, you know, if you have a chat history, the longer you go, if you're pasting a lot of code in there, I find it starts, even though it's probably within the context length, remembering as much the earlier stuff. And I think I've seen some studies on that, but again, it's changing all the time. So I'd have to look, you know, whatever model you're using or the latest thing is on that.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about the memory problem in general. I read this paper recently, a cognitive architecture for language agents, and it talked about memory in particular. And, you know, it kind of makes the point that it's not always just stuffing everything into the context window. And they kind of introduced this modular system where there's like semantic memory, episodic memory, procedural memory, and working memory. But yeah, I'm still interested in learning more about like where the rubber meets the road and how that's actually implemented.
Yeah, see memory. And it feels like this is changing all the time too, which is fun to be in the space where you could help figure it out. I think this is the paper. I'll share it in the chat as well. If anyone wants to
Koala.
read.
Yep.
And also, like I mentioned, there's a Slack channel. I usually share all these resources out in the Slack channel after too, which I will again share the link if people want to join. No pressure. I always try to say like, oh, we can talk there too before the live events. A lot of times people just end up talking at the live events, which is totally fine. But if you do want to discuss like, oh, Milvus is another one that I knew I was forgetting a common vector database. I'm sure there's other ones I'm missing too. Milvus, which is by Zillis, which is the parent company. Oh, Milvus, not Milvus. I can't type. I think that's how you spell it. I think there's also, I had one on the tip of my brain, but is it Supabase? Are they one? I want to say they are. There's a whole bunch. Milvus is, I think, pretty widely used one though too. It's a good one to call out. Thank you. Any other last thoughts? I know we're almost at the hour. And thank you so much for coming up here, Cody. You added a lot to the conversation. Really good questions. This is great. versus me just talking at the screen.
For sure. I'll keep coming back. This is awesome.
Yeah, hopefully you liked it. If you have books you want to recommend too, if you've seen around, let me know. They can be added to the list. The next book, wherever you found this event, you should be able to find it too, is Reinforcement Learning for Finance. So one thing we chose this because we've been looking for a good reinforcement learning book that is somewhat practical, that doesn't maybe read quite like a full textbook. And it's also in a space, finance, which we'll see how this book is. I haven't read it yet, but I always like reading kind of in some other domains that I don't fully work in. And it's kind of fun to see like how people think about machine learning in those spaces. So someone had mentioned the biology one seemed interesting for same reasons, right? Kind of seeing how people think about it in the space. And I forgot to share this earlier. I'll share this in the Slack. I'm still cross-posting this on Meetup and LinkedIn. So like wherever you find it, you should be able to find it there. But I did also create a Luma calendar. So a lot of more events are being posted on Luma now. And people might have a Luma account. And since these are just virtual events, they don't need to be tied to like a specific city on Meetup. So hopefully like just over time, everything might shift to be on Luma instead of Meetup, but you can find it on the same places right now, but want to share that out that you can subscribe there as well. If there's nothing else, we're at the hour, so I'll probably end the live streams. Thank you again, Cody, for coming up and coming up.
Yeah.
Super awesome to have you here.
For sure. All right. I'll talk to you later, man.
And everyone, stay connected, and hopefully I'll talk to you all at the next book club, if not some other events. And also in August, hoping to do some in-person stuff around Seattle, which is where I'm located. I don't know if anyone else is here, so keep an eye on that, and maybe even San Francisco as well. So with that, I'm going to end the stream. Thank you again. Say hello in the Slack if you joined there, and maybe do a permanent introduction as well. I'll talk to you all later.